Susan Kelly straightened her blue uniform one last time before the alien ship landed. Today was a big day for Earth. As commander of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, she was in charge of the first official tour for members of the Galactic Council. The ship touched down with barely a sound. Its shiny metal surface reflected the morning sun. Two very different aliens stepped out. The first aliens were the Xorians. They were tall and thin with pale blue skin. They have 4 arms and large dark eyes that blinked slowly. The second group were the Mirandi. They were short and round with green-brown skin that looked like tree bark. Both species moved carefully, as if afraid the Earth might hurt them somehow. "Welcome to Earth," Susan said with her best smile. "I'm Commander Kelly. I'll be your guide today." The lead Xorian bowed slightly. "I am Ambassador Skalath. We appreciate your hospitality, Commander." "We requested to see your industrial areas," said the Mirandi representative, whose name Susan couldn't even try to pronounce. "Our reports on human manufacturing are concerning." Susan nodded. "Of course. We have a tour planned of our largest chemical plant. It's just a short drive from here." The aliens followed her to a waiting bus. Susan noticed how they flinched at the sound of the engine starting. They seemed nervous about everything. The bumps in the road, the traffic, even the sound of horns honking nearby. At the chemical plant, manager Frank Martinez greeted them. Frank was a friendly man with a thick mustache and 20 years of experience running the facility. "Welcome to Global Chem," Frank said, handing out safety helmets. "We produce over 300 different chemicals here for everything from medicines to fertilizers." The aliens put on their helmets awkwardly. Ambassador Skalath leaned toward Susan. "Is this facility safe?" he asked quietly. Susan laughed. "Of course it is. Frank runs a tight ship." Frank led them through the main production area. The tour was going well until they reached Building C. Just as Frank was explaining how they processed nitrogen compounds, a loud bang echoed through the facility. The floor shook beneath them. The aliens dropped to the ground immediately. The Mirandi rolled into protective balls while the Xorians flattened themselves against the floor, all 4 arms covering their heads. Susan and Frank exchanged looks. Frank touched his radio. "Johnson, what was that?" A crackling voice responded. "Minor explosion in tank 4, sir. Pressure valve failed. No injuries, but we lost about half the batch." Frank shrugged. "These things happen sometimes." He turned to the aliens who were still on the floor. "Everything's fine, folks. Just a small equipment failure." The aliens slowly stood up, their bodies trembling. You call that small?" Ambassador Skalath's voice shook. "That was an explosion." "Not a big one," Susan said with a smile. "No one was hurt. But your atmospheric processors were damaged." The Mirandi representative pointed to the smoke rising from one building. Frank checked his tablet. "Just a couple of filters blown. We'll fix it by next week." The aliens stared at them in disbelief. Susan looked at her watch. "How about we grab some coffee? The cafeteria makes great donuts." 20 minutes later, Susan watched as the alien delegation huddled at one end of the cafeteria table, barely touching their drinks. Meanwhile, plant workers who had been near the explosion were already laughing about it at the next table. "Bill, I told you that valve was getting sticky," one worker called out. Yeah, you can say I told you so after you helped me clean up the mess," another replied, causing the table to burst into laughter. Ambassador Skalath leaned closer to Susan. "Your people, they are laughing. After an explosion." Susan nodded, sipping her coffee. "It wasn't that serious. But several of your atmospheric processors were damaged." Skalath protested again. "How are you not in a state of emergency?" Susan shrugged. "We'll fix it by next week." As she watched the aliens whisper urgently among themselves, Susan had no idea that this simple plant tour would completely change humanity's place in the galaxy. By tomorrow, Earth would have a new classification in the galactic database, one that no other living world had ever received. The large meeting room at Galactic Council headquarters buzzed with nervous energy. Aliens from 23 different species crowded around the central display. They had been called for an emergency meeting about Earth. Ambassador Skalath stood at the front of the room. His blue skin looked paler than usual. "What you are about to see is real footage from our diplomatic visit to Earth," he said. He pressed a button, and the screen lit up with images from the chemical plant. The room filled with gasps as they watched the explosion. But what shocked them more was what happened next. Humans laughing, drinking coffee, and treating the whole thing like it was normal. "This is not an isolated incident," Skalath continued. "Our researchers have compiled more evidence." The screen changed to show a series of images. Humans welding metal with sparks flying around them. Firefighters running into burning buildings. Construction workers walking on narrow steel beams hundreds of feet in the air. Doctors handling deadly diseases. Soldiers training with explosive devices. With each new image, the aliens in the room grew more agitated. A tall, thin alien with gray skin and 6 eyes stepped forward. This was Dr. Quickstraw, the Council's senior xenobiologist. "I have studied the data from Earth extensively," he said. "Their planet has extreme weather, dangerous animals, poisonous plants, and natural disasters. Humans have evolved to survive conditions that would kill most intelligent species." He pulled up a chart on the screen. "I am officially classifying Earth as a Class 12 death world." The room erupted in shocked whispers. No planet had ever been rated above Class 9 before. "Class 12, a small, furry alien asked. "Is that even possible?" "I created the classification specifically for Earth," Dr. Quickstraw explained. "These beings evolved in an environment that should have killed them thousands of times over. They find danger amusing." In another part of the room, military officials from various planets were having their own discussion. "What does this mean for galactic security?" asked General Vrex of the Mirandi Defense Force. "If humans can survive conditions we find lethal, what are their military capabilities?" "We need more information," said Admiral Ptok of the Xorian Fleet. "We should observe them more closely." Meanwhile, on Earth, NASA astronaut Joe Williams was eating breakfast with his crew. They were preparing for their first mission to Mars since joining the galactic community. "I heard about that chemical plant incident," said Linda Garcia, the mission pilot. "Susan said the aliens nearly had heart attacks." Joe laughed. "Wait until they see what we do in space." The NASA crew had no idea they were being watched. In orbit above Earth, a Galactic Council observation ship recorded everything. The aliens on board were particularly interested in human space travel, which they considered extremely dangerous even with advanced technology. The next day, Joe and his crew suited up for their mission. The rockets roared as the spacecraft lifted off from Kennedy Space Center. Inside the Council's observation ship, the aliens watched in horror. "Their propulsion system is powered by controlled explosions," one observer cried. "And they're sitting on top of it. The heat and pressure would kill any of our species instantly," another noted. "Look at their vital signs." A third pointed to a screen showing the astronauts' health data. "Their heart rates are elevated, but within normal range. They're excited, not terrified." Back on Earth, Susan Kelly was meeting with government officials. The Galactic Council had sent an urgent message about Earth's new classification. "What exactly does Deathworld mean?" asked the Secretary of State. Susan looked at the report. "Apparently, it means we're crazy by galactic standards. We live in conditions other species find lethal, and we don't seem to mind." "Is that a problem?" asked another official. "It could be an opportunity," Susan replied. "They're afraid of us, but also fascinated. They want to establish a research base here to study how we survive." The secretary nodded thoughtfully. "So we've accidentally become the galaxy's daredevils." In space, Joe Williams and his crew were unaware of Earth's new classification. As their ship accelerated toward Mars, Joe looked out the window at the stars. "Mission Control, we're on course and all systems are normal," he reported. Little did he know that his routine spaceflight would only confirm the aliens' worst fears about humans and their casual attitude toward deadly environments. The red dust of Mars swirled around the mining facility. 3 months had passed since Earth was classified as a death world. Now, humans and aliens were working together on a joint mining operation. The project was meant to build trust between species. Lisa Blackwell wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked the drilling equipment. As the human forewoman, she supervised a mixed team of 12 humans and 8 Tellurians. The Tellurians were peaceful aliens who looked like tall, thin humans with purple skin and 4-fingered hands. "How's it looking, Carlos?" Lisa called to her assistant. Carlos Mendez looked up from the control panel. "Pressure's a bit high in Tunnel 7. Nothing serious." The Tellurian worker next to Carlos, named Freen, twitched his long fingers nervously. "High pressure is very dangerous. Perhaps we should stop drilling." Lisa laughed. "It's fine. We're just hitting a harder rock layer." The Tellurians had been like this since day one, worried about every little thing. They wore extra safety gear and jumped at loud noises. Lisa tried to be patient. After all, they came from a world with no natural disasters and very little danger. The radio crackled. "Lisa, we've got a problem in Section B," said Ben Harper, one of her miners. "That unstable gas pocket we detected yesterday is growing." Lisa frowned. "Seal off Tunnel 8 as a precaution. I'll be right there." Vreen's purple skin paled. "Gas pocket. We should evacuate immediately." "It's probably nothing," Lisa said, grabbing her helmet. "But I'll check it out." She headed into the tunnels with Carlos. The Tellurians huddled together, whispering worriedly. Lisa and Carlos reached Section B. They could see the gas sensors flashing yellow warnings. Ben pointed to the readings on his tablet. "It's bigger than we thought," Ben said. "Pressure's building behind that rock face." Lisa studied the numbers. "Let's set up reinforcements in tunnels 7 through 9. "We can." She never finished her sentence. A deep rumble shook the entire mine. The lights flickered. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "Gas pockets breaking through," Ben shouted. The first explosion knocked them all off their feet. The second was even larger. The ground shook as 3 more explosions ripped through the mining complex. When the dust settled, Lisa found herself on the floor. Her ears were ringing. She touched her forehead and felt blood. "Everyone okay?" she called out. Carlos groaned. "My arm hurts. Might be broken." Ben stood up slowly. "I'm good. Just some cuts." Lisa's radio came to life with panicked alien voices. "Emergency. Emergency. Mining facility collapsing. All personnel evacuate immediately." The 3 humans looked at each other. "Well," Lisa said, "that was exciting." Carlos laughed, then winced at his injured arm. "Just another day at the office." "What do we do now, boss?" Ben asked. Lisa thought for a moment. "Gas is clearing out. Those explosions actually might have done us a favor." She pointed to the wall where the explosion had torn away rock. "Look at that shiny stuff behind the broken section." "Is that what I think it is?" Carlos asked, moving closer. Lisa nodded. "Rhodium deposits. Rich ones, too." She grinned. "Let's get some samples and stabilize these tunnels." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "What about evacuation?" "Why bother? We're already here. Might as well make it worth the trip." The 3 humans gathered equipment and began working, joking about job security and overtime pay, as they moved deeper into the damaged tunnels. 2 hours later, the Tellurian rescue team arrived in full protective gear. They moved carefully through the mine, expecting to find bodies. Instead, they found the humans had not only stabilized the damaged sections, but had set up mining equipment near the newly exposed mineral vein. The Tellurian captain stared at Lisa in disbelief. "You went back in for minerals?" Lisa looked up from the rock sample she was examining. "Well, yeah," she replied, wiping dust from her face. "We were already there. Might as well make it worth the trip." The Tellurians looked at each other in silent horror. One whispered to another, "The Council was right. They really are from a death world." Lisa just smiled and went back to work, already planning how to expand the operation into the newly discovered area. 6 months after the Mars mining incident, the Galactic Council faced a difficult problem. On one hand, humans were proving to be valuable allies. They could work in conditions that other species found deadly. On the other hand, their casual attitude toward danger was causing problems across the galaxy. In a large meeting room, Council members discussed the latest incidents. "The humans are impossible," said a Mirandi representative, his round body shaking with emotion. "Last week, during an official dinner on our homeworld, a human chef caused a panic." "What happened?" asked Ambassador Skalath. "The human, Greg Peters, prepared a dessert that he set on fire. On purpose." The Mirandi's voice rose in disbelief. "He called it flambe or something similar." 3 of our ambassadors fled the room in terror. A tall, fish-like alien nodded in agreement. "We had a similar incident. When Earth's diplomatic team visited our water world, a human female named Karen Smith held her breath underwater for over 4 minutes during a cultural exchange. Our medical team thought she was dying." Skalath sighed. "These incidents are becoming too common, but we cannot deny that humans have helped us. The Mars mining operation recovered more resources in 3 months than we expected to find in a year." "That may be true," said a military officer, "but have you seen the report from Admiral Jack Rogers? He described human recreational activities to the High Council last week." The room grew quiet. Everyone had heard about that disastrous meeting. Admiral Jack Rogers had been invited to speak about Earth's defense capabilities. Instead, he had enthusiastically described human hobbies to a horrified audience: skydiving, jumping from flying vehicles for fun, rock climbing, scaling dangerous cliffs without good reason, whitewater rafting, deliberately riding small boats through violent water currents. "You do these things for fun?" the Exorian High Counselor had asked. "Sure do," Jack had replied cheerfully. "I've got videos if you want to see." They did not want to see. "We must find a way to work with humans while limiting these cultural misunderstandings," Skalath said. "I propose creating special guidelines for human interactions." Meanwhile, on a space station orbiting Jupiter, another incident was unfolding. The research station Unity was a joint project between humans and 5 alien species. Scientists there studied Jupiter's storms. The station's recreation room was crowded as off-duty crew members watched a live feed from Earth. A human sporting event called extreme snowboarding was playing on the large screen. The aliens watched in horror as humans strapped boards to their feet and slid down snow-covered mountains at high speeds. Some even did flips and spins in the air. "This is entertainment for you?" asked Mira, a green-skinned Solari scientist. "Of course," said Paul Rivera, a human researcher. "I used to compete when I was younger. Broke my leg twice and my arm once." He grinned at the memory. The aliens moved away from him slightly. At that moment, the station's alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the room. "Warning: meteor impact on level 3. Hull breach detected. Emergency protocols activated," announced the computer. The aliens immediately ran toward the escape pods, following their training. The humans, however, moved in the opposite direction, toward the damaged area. "Where are you going?" called Mira. "We must evacuate." Paul shouted over his shoulder as he ran. "Someone needs to seal that breach before the whole station loses pressure." The station's human captain, Elizabeth Ward, was already at the damaged section when Paul arrived. She was pushing a heavy sealing plate against the breach while air rushed out around her. "Give me a hand," she yelled. "We need to bolt this down." Paul and 3 other humans worked quickly, securing the plate while alarms blared around them. The rushing air made it hard to stand, and the temperature dropped rapidly as the station's atmosphere escaped. When it was done, Elizabeth checked the seal and nodded in satisfaction. "That'll hold until the repair team can fix it properly." "Captain," called a voice over the intercom. "The alien crew members have launched 3 escape pods. They think the station is doomed." Elizabeth sighed and touched her communicator. "Tell them it's safe to return. Just a small breach, already fixed." "Again," Paul laughed. "That's the 3rd time this month they've evacuated over something minor." Elizabeth shrugged. "They're not used to emergencies like we are. They'll learn eventually." Neither of them realized that footage of their casual repair operation was being transmitted back to the Galactic Council, where it would cause yet another diplomatic crisis. 1 year after first contact, the Deep Space Research Station Horizon floated in orbit around a distant star. The station was home to 30 scientists, 15 humans, and 15 aliens from various species. They studied the unusual radiation patterns of the star. The station was shaped like a wheel, slowly spinning to create artificial gravity. At its center was the main reactor that powered everything. Samantha Wright yawned as she checked the reactor readings for the 3rd time that day. As the station's chief engineer, she was responsible for keeping everything running smoothly. "Another boring day in paradise," she muttered to herself. Her alien assistant, a Xorian named Zilks, looked up from his own screen. "Boring is good, Engineer Wright. Boring means safe." Samantha smiled. After working together for 6 months, she understood how differently they viewed things. To Zilks, any excitement meant danger. To Samantha, a little danger made life interesting. Suddenly, one of the reactor readings spiked into the red zone. Alarms began to sound throughout the station. "That's not good," Samantha said, quickly typing commands into her console. "Radiation levels rising in the core." Zilks's voice went high with fear. "The containment field is failing." The station's intercom clicked on. "Attention all personnel," said the calm voice of Captain Singh. "We have a level 1 reactor emergency. This is not a drill. All non-essential crew proceed to escape pods immediately." Zilks was already backing toward the door. "We must evacuate. The safety protocols are clear." Samantha was still studying the readings. "You go ahead. I need to see what's causing this." "But the radiation will kill you." She shrugged. "Probably not. My suit has good shielding." "Go on. I'll be fine." As Zilks hurried away, Samantha grabbed her radiation protection gear from a locker. The suit was heavy and uncomfortable, but it would give her some protection. She put on the helmet and activated the internal air supply. In the corridors, the non-human crew was rushing toward the escape pods. The humans were moving more calmly, some heading to their emergency stations, others going to help with the evacuation. Samantha made her way to the central core. She paused at the final airlock. Beyond this point, radiation levels would be dangerous even with her suit. She took a deep breath and opened the door. The reactor room was bathed in pulsing red light from the warning systems. Samantha could hear the radiation alarms blaring. She walked carefully toward the main control panel, checking the readings. Looks like the cooling system failed, and the backup didn't kick in," she muttered to herself. She began humming a tune as she worked, an old habit that helped her think. Over her radio, she heard the Xorian science officer's panicked voice. "Right, you'll die in there." "Probably not," she replied casually. "But if we don't fix this, we lose 6 months of research data. That would really suck." She moved to the manual override controls. The heat in the room was intense, and her radiation meter was beeping warnings. She ignored it and focused on the task. First, she activated the emergency cooling systems. Then she bypassed the damaged circuits that had caused the failure. Finally, she reset the containment field generators. The process took nearly 3 hours. By the time she finished, her suit was showing dangerous levels of radiation exposure. But the reactor readings had returned to normal. Samantha smiled behind her helmet. "See, not so bad." When she finally emerged from the reactor room, she found Captain Singh waiting. "That was too close, right?" he said, looking worried. Medical says you got a higher dose than is safe. Samantha removed her helmet, revealing red burns on her face, where radiation had penetrated the suit. I've had worse sunburns at the beach, Captain. The alien crew watched the whole thing on the security cameras, Singh told her. They're disturbed by your actions. Why? The reactor's fixed, the station's safe, and our research data is intact. They don't understand how you could walk into lethal radiation levels like it was nothing. Samantha shrugged. It wasn't nothing. It was necessary. What Samantha didn't know was that the footage of her repair work had been automatically transmitted back to Earth, and from there to the Galactic Council. Aliens across the galaxy were watching in stunned silence as a human casually fixed a reactor in conditions they considered instantly fatal. Dr. Quickstroll, the senior xenobiologist who had classified Earth as a death world, watched the video multiple times. Fascinating, he said to his colleagues. They truly do not experience fear the way we do. 18 months after Earth joined the galactic community, a new worry spread through the Galactic Council. If humans treated deadly accidents as minor problems, what would they be like in battle? The council members gathered in their grand meeting hall. The mood was tense. We must discuss the human military question, said High Counselor Vex, a tall Xorian with dark blue skin. Our reports suggest they have a long history of warfare on their planet. Ambassador Skalath nodded. It is true. Humans have fought many wars among themselves, but they have followed our peace treaties since joining the galactic community. Peace cannot last forever, said General Krill of the Mirandi. The Drax Collective is becoming more aggressive at our outer borders. What if humans decide to fight? As the council debated, news arrived of a border incident. Several Xorian outposts had been attacked by the Drax Collective, an aggressive species known for taking territory from weaker neighbors. This is troubling, said Vexex. The Drax have never attacked us directly before. We must respond, said General Krill. But our forces in that sector are limited. Skalath looked thoughtful. Earth recently established a small peacekeeping outpost near that border. Perhaps they could assist. The council members looked at each other nervously. Using human soldiers would be a major step. Very well, Vex decided. Ask the humans for help, but tell them this is only a peacekeeping mission. No combat. 3 days later, Captain Doug Peterson arrived at the border outpost with 50 human peacekeepers. They set up camp near the Xorian base that had been attacked. Doug was a tall man with a weathered face who had served in many conflict zones on Earth. He studied the maps of the area carefully. The Drax have been probing this sector for weeks, explained the Xorian commander, but they have never used such heavy weapons before. What kind of weapons are we talking about? Doug asked. Energy cannons, mostly, and their new plasma bombs, which they've never used in actual combat before now. Doug nodded. We'll set up patrols and early warning systems. My team has experience with this kind of peacekeeping. The Xorians watched with interest as the humans established their camp with remarkable speed. They set up defenses, communication systems, and even a small medical facility. 2 days later, in the early morning hours, the attack came. The Drax ships appeared suddenly, dropping from light speed directly above the human camp. They're targeting the humans, shouted the Xorian sensor operator. They must see them as the greater threat. The first plasma bombs hit the human camp directly. The explosions were massive, sending dirt and debris high into the air. Buildings collapsed. Equipment was destroyed. The Xorians watched in horror on their screens. All those humans, whispered one officer. They had no warning. The Xorian commander began composing a message to Earth, offering condolences for the tragic loss of life. Then the dust began to clear. To the Xorians' amazement, humans were emerging from the rubble. Many were injured, bleeding from cuts or holding broken limbs. But they were alive, and they were organizing a counterattack. How is this possible? Asked the Xorian commander. Those plasma bombs should have killed everything in that camp. On the battlefield, Doug Peterson pulled himself from the remains of the command center. His left arm hung at an odd angle, clearly broken. His face was streaked with blood from a cut on his forehead. But he was already giving orders. Charlie team, get those wounded to the medical tent. Alpha and Bravo. Defensive positions now. They'll be sending ground troops next. A young soldier limped up to Doug. Sir, my ears are still ringing from that blast. That was some spicy air. Another soldier laughed as he checked his weapon. Yeah, nothing like a morning explosion to wake you up. The Drax forces, expecting to find only destruction, were completely unprepared when the humans launched their counterattack. Despite their injuries, the human peacekeepers fought with remarkable effectiveness. Doug led from the front, ignoring his broken arm as he directed his troops. The Drax, faced with enemies who should have been dead, began to retreat in confusion. Within hours, the battle was over. The Drax ships fled back across the border. The human peacekeepers had successfully defended the outpost. When the Xorian commander finally approached the human camp, he found Doug sitting on a crate while a medic set his broken arm. Captain Peterson. The Xorian said, "Your people fought after surviving direct hits from plasma bombs. How is this possible?" Doug looked up and shrugged with his good shoulder. "We're soldiers. Getting hit is part of the job. But the injuries your team sustained." 2 years after first contact, the Galactic Council's Grand Hall was filled with representatives from over 50 different species. They had gathered for a historic event, the signing of the new Human Galactic Cooperation Treaty. At the center of the hall stood a large circular table. On one side sat the alien representatives. On the other side sat the human delegation, led by Susan Kelly, now Earth's chief diplomatic officer. Susan had come a long way since that first tour of the chemical plant. She had become the face of humanity to the galaxy, helping aliens understand her strange, resilient species. Ambassador Skalath, who had been the first alien to visit Earth, stood to address the gathering. Today marks a new chapter in galactic history, he began. When we first met humans, we were confused and frightened by their behavior. They laughed at dangers that would terrify any sensible species. They walked into radiation zones. They fought after surviving explosions that should have killed them. The hall was quiet as everyone listened. But over these 2 years, we have learned much, Skalath continued. Humans do not have a death wish. They are not reckless for no reason. They simply evolved on a world that required courage and resilience to survive. Susan smiled as she listened. It had taken many diplomatic incidents, but the galaxy was finally beginning to understand humans. The new treaty contained special provisions never before included in galactic law. There were sections on expected casualty tolerance disparities and differing definitions of emergency situations. In simple terms, it recognized that what humans considered safe, others might see as deadly. And that was okay. As Skalath finished his speech, attendants brought forward the treaty for signing. A small ceremonial flame burned in a special holder at the center of the table, representing the light of knowledge and cooperation. Alan Jones, a member of the human delegation, stood up to offer Earth's formal response. He was new to diplomacy, but had been chosen for his scientific background. As Alan moved toward the podium, his elbow accidentally knocked against the ceremonial flame holder. The holder tipped over, spilling burning fuel across the table. The flames spread quickly, igniting the decorative cloths covering the table. Within seconds, a significant fire was burning at the center of the historic ceremony. Panic erupted among the alien representatives. They rushed away from the table, some diving under furniture, others running for the exits. Emergency alarms began to sound throughout the building. The humans reacted very differently. Susan grabbed a decorative wall hanging and used it to smother part of the fire. Alan quickly removed his jacket and did the same. Other human delegates grabbed water pitchers from nearby tables and doused the flames. Within a minute, the humans had extinguished the fire. They stood around the scorched table, some laughing about the incident. "Well," Alan said, brushing ash from his hands. That's one way to make a ceremony memorable. The aliens slowly began returning to the hall, looking cautious and embarrassed. Ambassador Skalath was one of the first to approach the humans. "I understand now," he said quietly to Susan. "I truly do. This small incident has taught me more than 2 years of reports and meetings." Susan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Your species doesn't disregard danger," Skalath explained. "You simply developed on a world where courage was necessary for survival." Susan smiled. "That, and we've learned that sometimes you just have to laugh when things go boom. Otherwise, you'd never get anything done." Despite the scorched table and smoky room, the treaty signing continued. The document was placed on the damaged table, and representatives from all species signed it. As the ceremony concluded, a new classification was added to the galactic records. Earth remained a Class 12 death world, but now had an additional note: home to a species that views catastrophes as challenges to overcome rather than disasters to flee. Later, during the celebration dinner, alien diplomats cautiously asked humans about their seemingly strange relationship with danger. "It's simple," explained Alan Jones. "On Earth, if you wait for perfect safety, you'll never do anything. So we make safety equipment, we prepare for problems, and then we move forward anyway." Susan watched as the aliens considered this idea. They still didn't fully understand humans, but they were trying. And in the vast, dangerous universe, having tough, resilient allies who laughed in the face of explosions was starting to seem like a very good thing. The universe would never be the same, and that was just fine with everyone.